In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Glory to Jesus Christ. We come here at the break of a new month. November, the 11th month. Here we are. Now we have turned the calendar one more time. Time is marching forward. Something has changed for us. The weather has changed. The clock has changed. Did everybody figure that out last night? I know most of our clocks these days do most of that work for us. At least our phones do. Something has changed. Now, last night, the kids were out, many of them, not in my neighborhood, because we have the only kids in our neighborhood, and there's only 3 other houses. But they went out last night, and many of them were dressed as, there's some funny costumes last night. Some of the funniest ones I saw last night was Gumby, right? That was Caleb. And we had an Elvis, out there just having a little bit of fun. But there were other kids out there dressed like, death, blood, whatever, the worst possible zombies you could come up with. That seems to be a popular thing in our current culture. I'm not into zombie movies or anything like that, so I don't get it. Some of the kids that are out there are celebrating just being with part of the community, hanging out, being part of the neighborhood, going and meeting the neighbors if you happen to have some in the neighborhood you live in. We don't. Right? But others are out there celebrating death and destruction and losing themselves to what the world is calling us to do. See, I brought that down real quick, didn't I? The world is calling us to death. The world is calling us to self-indulgence, to gathering candy and not sharing it with anybody else and looking as gruesome and ugly as we possibly can. Not just on that one night a year. How ugly can we make ourselves the rest of the year? The world wants us to find out. By modifying the temple of our body that the Lord has given to us. By giving in to the lessons that not so good people have tried to give to us. The church, Christ, is offering something different. It's offering life. It's offering us a chance to look at this world and die to this world, die to those devils that are trying to pull us down to being eternally separated from God. Christ is calling us to be eternally unified with Himself, to have life everlasting, to always be living in paradise. Think of the best way you can describe paradise. It doesn't look like walking around in 30-degree temperature in Ithaca with kids dressed in costumes. But that was fun for them. I get that. Not for me at my age anymore. Paradise, the greatest of all things, is what Christ is calling us to live for. But in the meantime, while we're training ourselves to be ready to enter the kingdom of heaven, while we're training our souls to become more and more Christ-like, we're stuck living here, aren't we? We live in this world, don't we? I don't see anybody who has, maybe it's homemade, but at least you bought your cloth. You had to go to some store just to get the clothing that you're wearing now. We have to engage with this world to live here, to gain the lessons that Christ is offering us. We had to get in our cars that we had to haggle for at some car dealership. That's one of my least favorite things I ever have to do as a grown human being. To get here to this temple, usually. I don't think anybody really walks. It'd be hard for everybody here, actually. We have to engage with the world somehow so that we can then get those lessons that Christ has tried to give us over and over again. So how do we engage with the world, which has different ideas and different goals for itself, while at the same time trying to bring ourselves up to be citizens of the kingdom of heaven? Those are wildly different things. How do we engage with our neighbors? How do we engage with society? And yet at the same time know that we are dead to this world through our baptism so that we can be alive with Christ forever. So this is in your bulletin. Don't read along. It's okay. Just listen. I don't want to hear the crinkle, crinkle, crinkle. in a letter that St. Basil the Great wrote way back in the 4th or 5th century, 1,600 years ago, they're already dealing with the question, how do I live in this world while still keeping my eyes on wanting to be a good Christian, on wanting to build my spiritual life? St. Basil writes a little treatise called Advice to Young Men on the Right Use of Greek Literature. Now, they're not just talking about the Greek that was being written at that time. They're talking what we consider the classics, Homer, Ulysses, the Iliad, the Aeneid, all those things, the great books that for them were all the entertainment that they had and the theater. We see it as highly enlightened things, and some people in the church were saying to engage with the world is to turn your back on the church. Well, St. Basil, I think, offers some really tempered advice. And here's what he writes to these young men who want to use their culture. For just as bees know how to extract honey from flowers, which to men are agreeable only for their fragrance and color, even so here also those who look for something more than pleasure and enjoyment in such writers may derive profit for their souls. When we look at what the world has to offer us, here in our current circumstance, wonderful education, plenty of food, all of the toys and gifts we could ever want, those things that the world offers, what benefit do they have for our soul? Not simply gathering all of our treasures here to have benefit for the comfort of our life, and, truth be told, that usually never turns out good when we're just comfortable all the time. If you're comfortable, you got to get moving. We've heard that phrase. The things that we get here in this world, the way that our society works, what is the benefit for our soul in all of those things? Did you think about that last night as maybe kids came to your door begging for candy? Which, if you're an alien to come down from outer space, kids coming to your door and begging for candy and people giving it, it doesn't even make sense. What's the benefit for our soul in those things? There can be some. I'm not dismissing it out of hand. St. Basil continues. For the bees do not visit all the flowers without discrimination, implying that the bees they ignore some flowers and they go to others because there's some benefit, there's the flavor that they like, there's the nectar that they like. But even the flower that St. Basil said previously, they don't always take the whole flower, just little bits for what can be beneficial for them. The bees do not visit all the flowers without discrimination, nor indeed do they seek to carry away entirely those upon which they land, but rather having taken so much as is adapted to their needs, they let the rest go. Are we willing to take what we need from this world to only the degree that we need it and to let the rest go? Can we engage in being part of a community ritual, which is, benign on its face? Going out and letting my children get me candy once a year. They took it and hid it in their bedrooms last night, by the way, so I didn't get any. Can we stop right there and say, now I'm not going to engage with the rest of what the people are doing today? I thought it was odd that you walk past so many houses and they set up graveyards in the front lawn with the most gross, I don't even like horror movies anymore. That's just as I've gotten older, with the most bloody, ugly, deathly things on there. Is there a place when we can say, this is what the world is beneficial for me, but now I have to stop. I can't go any further. I pulled up to the funeral in Buffalo, was it 2 weeks ago now? And Father Jason in his front yard, and he's a wonderful priest and a man I look up to and emulate quite often. In his yard, he had a hay bale and a pumpkin, and he had a gravestone. And from half a block away, I'm thinking, he's a friend of mine. Oh, I'm going to nail this guy. I can't believe he dressed up the rectory like that. And as you got up closer to the house, on the gravestone it said, Christ is risen. How awesome is that? He took something that was being used for terrible purposes for making people feel awful and scared and separated and all that stuff that happens in the dark. And he was using it as a symbol of hope. We cry, Christ is risen. When do we start it? In the middle of the night, when the rest of the world is dark. When everybody has gone to sleep, we come here and, Lord willing, if we get this place, that bell out back starts ringing again at 1 a.m. as we're proclaiming Christ is risen to our neighbors. We take, that was awesome, right? She liked that. We take back what the world is degrading. And not only do we take the nectar out of it so that the Lord can minister to us through the world he has created, then we start to give back. Through our spirituality, through our love for our brothers and sisters, for our fortitude to maintain our Christian faith and our spirituality in all things, death starts to recede, the darkness starts to go away, and the light that Christ brings begins to shine more and more. I don't think I've used this example for a couple years. We're moving to Pascha now. It's only November, but we got to start thinking about it because we start the Advent fast in just 2 weeks. John gets a couple extra weeks, right? We start in just a few weeks, and after that, it's the New Year. New Year is basically the beginning of Lent. Therefore, it is almost Pascha right now. We have to be thinking that way. All right, the example that I like to use, if you're coming to the church in the dark, I mean literally driving to this particular place, and you're coming up Trip Hammer Road, which many of you do. If you come up in the dark, there's a light that's up here at the corner. It's the blinking light in town. In Lansing, we have one blinking light, one 3-colored light. Big town. You can see that light from 1.9 miles away in the dark. Because the whole world is settled down, there's nothing going on, you can see that pinpoint of light telling you where the intersection is from quite a distance away. In the darkness, Christ also showed himself. Through the terrible things that might happen in our world, in our society, in our communities, Christ makes himself known. Now, the obverse of that is, if you're coming to the church in the daylight, as you came up today, you can't see that light until you're less than half a mile away from it. Because the whole world is bright. You can't see what is really being shown to you so far ahead of time. So the same thing for Christ. He shows himself to us sometimes in the darkest places. Sometimes we have to suffer through what this world is doing to us. Taking away your ability to take off from work for a holy day or whatever. It's just an example. There's plenty of others. Sometimes the darkness of this world is there to try to take away our love for Christ. But there's always that pinpoint of Christ there saying, just follow me. Keep your eyes on me, that light that shines in the darkness. When was the resurrection proclaimed? While it was still dark. Mary Magdalene's in that garden, and she sees the resurrection. Not the resurrection itself, but Christ, the after effect of it. Now, we've been asked to live in this world. He's killing me. We've been asked to live in this world. And it's for our benefit. God has put us here in this place at this time with this group of people. We're from all over the world sitting here right now. I can say it. I can see at least 3 countries represented in this room. 4, maybe, right? From all over, and we're put into this one place. Now we have to fight against the darkness of the world, the death that the devil wants us to fall down to, and bring ourselves up as a community so that we can see Christ in all things and for the benefit of our souls. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Glory to Jesus Christ.